An old farmer reached his breaking point with a lively puppy who was constantly barking. He threw it out of his truck onto the road. But when a biker gang encountered this shocking situation, no one could predict the unimaginable events that would unfold. An old, rusty pickup truck rattled and shook violently, stopping under the blazing summer sun, baking the deserted country road. Frank, an old farmer with weathered hands from years of labor under the Oklahoma sun, sat at the wheel. He took a deep breath. "Well, this is your stop, lad." In the rattling bed of the truck, a tiny black puppy was playfully yapping and bouncing around, held back by a short rope. The puppy's excited, high-pitched barks filled the air, but Frank found the noise unbearable. His grandchildren had given him the energetic puppy as a gift when they visited from the city a few weeks ago, not realizing that Frank would find the puppy's endless energy and loud barking more irritating than cute. Growling under his breath, Frank jerked the truck over to the side of the deserted road and slammed on the brake. "Stupid mangy mutt won't shut his damn yap," he grumbled, throwing open the truck door and stomping around to the back. The little puppy jumped around happily on the truck bed, its stubby tail wagging furiously, completely unaware of its owner's bad mood. Frank reached down with both his gnarled hands and roughly scooped up the squirming puppy. Without warning or hesitation, he carried it to the edge of the road, ignoring the pleading look in its innocent eyes. With an angry grunt, the old man flung the helpless puppy as hard as he could through the air. The little dog let out a frightened yelp as it flew and landed with a thud on the road, some 40 feet away. Frank turned and stomped back to his truck without a second glance, all hints of remorse buried deep within his hardened conscience. The truck's loud engine rumbled to life as he drove off. Down on the road, the puppy seemed dazed but unharmed. It looked around, confused and betrayed, then started running along the road, trying to follow the truck. After walking for about 15 minutes, the dog began swaying from side to side, worn out by the exhausting heat. Just then, the roar of engines shattered the heavy silence like a thunderclap, as a pack of bikers on huge, growling motorcycles came tearing around a bend farther up the road. Leaning over almost horizontal, their studded leather jackets and biker chains whipped behind them as they took the curve at high speed on bald tires. Dakota was the leader of the Lost Riders biker gang. He was a big, tough-looking guy with a long beard and mustache. As he rode his motorcycle, his facial hair blew in the wind behind his sunglasses. Dakota had a serious frown on his face. Up ahead on the road, there was a tiny black puppy stumbling around, looking confused. The bikers didn't notice the puppy until the very last second. Dakota reacted fast. He yanked his bike sharply to the side, swerving to avoid hitting the puppy. He barely missed running over the helpless little pup as he slammed on the brakes. His massive motorcycle screeched loudly, the back tire leaving a thick black streak on the road before finally skidding to a stop. The rest of the bikers packed in tightly behind Dakota, their motorcycles growling as they spotted the puppy crouched in the middle of the road. One biker shouted over the engines, "What is that?" Dakota replied in a low voice, "Looks like a damn puppy to me." He shut off his motorcycle and swung off the bike, stomping over for a closer look at the trembling pup. As he approached, Dakota could clearly see signs of neglect. The puppy was painfully thin, its fur matted and dirty, and it looked badly dehydrated from the scorching summer heat. One of the riders, a hulking man named Roscoe, who secretly had a soft spot for helpless animals, climbed off his motorcycle. He carefully approached the frightened puppy, holding out his large hand. "Here, pup. Come here, boy," Roscoe said gently, making soft kissing sounds. To everyone's surprise, the tiny black puppy slowly walked toward him, nudging its dry little nose into Roscoe's dirt-crusted palm. It gave him a grateful lick. Dakota let out a rough sigh and frowned slightly as he watched the scene unfold. "Looks like this little guy's had it rough." He fixed the rest of the Lost Riders with his trademark intense glare, his jaw tightening. "We can't just leave him out here to die of dehydration and heat stroke." Roscoe spoke up, gently scratching the puppy's fluffy head. "That ain't right, boss. It's just a baby." "I didn't say we were going to leave him," Dakota replied. He crouched down on the road and carefully examined the underfed pup. The tiny ribs and jutting hip bones were clearly visible. "Not on my watch. Anyone who hurts a helpless little thing like this, just for fun, will answer directly to me," he said ominously. "So, what do you want us to do?" Dog, another biker, asked, revving his engine impatiently. A disturbingly sinister smile slowly spread across Dakota's weathered face, instant and unsettling. "First, we get this puppy somewhere safe, where he can get food, water, and proper medical treatment if needed." Then he paused, his cold eyes glinting as his jaw tightened with resolve. "Then we find out whose damn puppy he was to begin with and pay that gentleman a nice visit, Lost Rider style." The other bikers cheered loudly, banging their fists on their gas tanks and revving their engines in support. The Lost Riders hit the road again as a pack, engines roaring defiantly. They quickly located the nearest vet clinic to get the pup checked out. After being examined and receiving food, water, and treatment for dehydration, they set out to find a safe place for the puppy to stay temporarily. But the bikers hadn't forgotten about the twisted individual who had cruelly abandoned the helpless puppy to die on the roadside in the first place. After several dead ends in their search for the culprit, Dakota and his crew started to get frustrated. They doubled their efforts, leaning harder on their network of small-town informants and shady bar regulars. The bikers made it crystal clear they'd go to any length to track down the person who had tossed away an innocent puppy's life. Word of the manhunt spread fast, and the county watched with bated breath to see if the Lost Riders would follow through on their promise of revenge. Bets were placed, and rumors swirled about the brutal punishment that might await the mystery puppy abandoner if the gang ever got their hands on him. Just when it seemed like the trail had gone completely cold, a gas station attendant finally gave up a name: Frank Muckler, a miserable old cuss who ran a rundown farm just past the county line. According to the attendant, Frank had come into their station a few weeks earlier with a tiny black puppy yapping happily in the back of his truck. But it was Frank's visit the previous day that stuck with him. He said Frank had pulled in for fuel, and when asked about the dog, the old man grinned in a sick way. "That mangy mutt? Oh, I got rid of that yapping hairball all right," Frank had said, before letting out a raspy, wheezy laugh. He continued, "Couldn't take its damn barking anymore, so a few weeks back I took it for a little ride out to the old country road and dumped the stupid thing right off the side. Got me some peace, finally." The attendant was so disturbed by Frank's confession, so proud and casual about abandoning the puppy, that he couldn't keep quiet. When Dakota's men started sniffing around for leads, he quickly spilled everything, eager to help bring the animal abuser to justice. When Dakota heard this, his expression turned grim with satisfaction. They now had a name and an address. The discovery made their mission feel deeply personal and completely justified. This was the break they'd been waiting for. Dakota ordered all the Lost Riders to get ready. They would pay Frank a visit. After surveilling the farm for several days, Dakota and his team confirmed beyond any doubt the cranky old man was, in fact, the negligent former owner, a heartless bastard whose cruel attitude and behavior only fueled their disgust. "That does it for me," Dakota growled, fists clenching in rage as he witnessed the appalling display. "That sick piece of trash doesn't have a single redeeming quality. He needs to be taught a lesson he'll never forget." One night, under a clear sky, the Lost Riders enacted their unique brand of frontier justice. They surrounded the property under cover of darkness, securing the perimeter to ensure their presence went unnoticed. Then, brandishing cans of spray paint, they got to work. By the time they were done, the entire property looked like it had been defaced by demonic vagrants. A vast canvas of black looming graffiti and those same 4 bone-chilling words glaring out from every angle in a sulphurous red. "We know what you did." Dakota and his men vanished into the night just as silently as they had arrived, taking satisfaction in imagining Frank's face when he woke up the next morning. When Frank stepped out of his farmhouse at first light, he was greeted by a terrifying sight. Every surface was covered in garish graffiti. The old man's eyes widened with shock and fear as he spun around, searching desperately for the long-gone culprits. A cold wave of panic crept down his crooked spine. He knew right then that the lost riders had discovered what he'd done to that puppy a couple of weeks earlier. Now it was only a matter of time before they returned. Frank's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out of this nightmare. He knew the biker's reputation for brutal vigilante justice was no exaggeration. The crafty old farmer had faced plenty of tough situations in his life out here, but never one that left him feeling so utterly helpless and afraid. Then an idea struck him. If he turned himself in to the police, the law could protect him from the gang's revenge. With no other option, Frank decided this was his only chance to stay alive and avoid whatever cruel punishment they had in store for him. Moving quickly, he grabbed a few belongings, his truck keys, and quietly fled his graffiti-covered property before sunrise. He drove in a panic, checking his mirrors constantly for any sign he was being followed, until he finally reached the police station. There he stumbled inside, looking like a man who had just walked through the gates of hell. The old man spilled the entire sordid tale, admitting to abandoning the innocent puppy on the side of the road in a pathetic attempt to get rid of it. He also told them about the lost riders leaving menacing graffiti all over his property, warning him that they knew what he had done. The shocked officers had no choice but to take both the confession and the threats seriously. They immediately took Frank into custody on charges of animal cruelty and abandonment. While being booked and processed, Frank couldn't stop rambling about the biker gang and how he needed to be kept in protective custody before they carried out whatever twisted justice they had planned. The police officers just shook their heads at the broken old man's fearful ramblings about being targeted by the notorious biker gang. In the end, Frank was arrested and jailed for 2 days, then later fined and sentenced to probation and community service for his crime of animal cruelty and abandonment. As severe as the fines were for the bitter old farmer, Frank felt that, with any luck, taking responsibility and facing the consequences of the legal system would convince the bikers to leave him alone. The Lost Riders closely monitored the situation after Frank's arrest and confession to abandoning the puppy. When they saw that he had turned himself in, pled guilty, and been sentenced by the court, Dakota and his men reluctantly agreed their point had been made. The old cuss had learned his lesson the hard way. As much as they despised him for the cruel mistreatment of a defenseless puppy, the Lost Riders' harsh brand of justice was always meant for those who showed no remorse. Since Frank had owned up to his crime and faced punishment through proper legal channels, they would leave him alone for now. However, Dakota made it clear to his brothers that if Frank ever so much as looked at another animal the wrong way, they wouldn't hesitate to return. He was now forever on their retribution radar. Once the puppy fully recovered and regained his strength, Roscoe officially adopted him as his own. From that point on, the tiny black pup became the most unlikely but beloved mascot of the notorious biker gang. Untold miles were ridden with the dog safely tucked into Roscoe's weathered leather jacket as they roared from town to town and open road to open road. What a story! A tough gang of bikers rescued an abandoned puppy and made sure the neglectful owner faced the consequences. Surprisingly, these rugged bikers had a real soft spot for animals. Right? Share your thoughts in the comments. Were you shocked by the Lost Riders' actions, or did you expect them to have a strong sense of justice? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another incredible tale.